If your users keep on leaving your SaaS, your product isn't the problem, you are. Now, this is not about features, it's not about pricing, it's not even about ads. This is about your customer experience. Because if a new user were to go through terrible customer experience, they have no idea what else going on in your product, they're confused, they will leave. That is why in this video, I'll break down to you the reasons why users are leaving, and I'll also be sharing you the exact systems that I've helped software founders to prevent customer churn. So now there are a lot of reasons why users churn, and I'm just gonna name the most common objections on why users churn. Forgive me for my ugly handwriting. Usually when I try to make these whiteboard videos, my handwriting is always atrocious, but I guess as long as you can understand and you're hearing on what I'm talking about, that's all that matters. So the first one that really comes to my mind, that's supposed to be a bullet point, is price. Just gonna put PRC, pricing. The second reason on why users churn, the second biggest reason is one-off usage. I'm just going to put one usage. Basically means that users would to just use your product once and then they don't use it ever again. The third most common reason is product to market fit. Product to user fit, not market fit, user fit. This basically means that your user were to think that your product is something else, but then once they actually were to sign up to your product, then it's something different, so they don't actually need it. So these are the most common reasons on why users were to churn: pricing, one-off usage, and wrong product to user fit. But the thing with all of this is that I would call these inevitable conditions, basically meaning that in all of these three conditions, these are very natural things that happen whenever you were to have a subscription-based business. As long as you're running on an MRR type of subscription business model, it is inevitable that your product will either churn because of pricing. Doesn't matter how cheap or how expensive your product is, users will always churn. And it is also natural that people will only use it once and that they never return. And then same thing with product to user fit. These are all very natural things. But the thing that I really want to talk about is another point on why users churn that people in the software industry don't really talk about, and that is poor customer experience. Poor CE. This stands for customer experience, by the way. This is the thing that no one really shines the light on, and this is also the reason why I'm making this whole entire video. It's around this thing, this phenomenon called poor customer experience. Now let's actually get deeper into it. What is poor customer experience? The first thing that comes to my mind is a thing called friction. Friction here is one of the reasons that causes poor customer experience. And to also even dive more deeper into it, friction, to put in simple words, basically means that you are slowing down the journey of your user. And this can happen when, if let's say in your onboarding or with the start of your sign up, users have to answer too many questions in the onboarding process. And I'll give you a prime example. This software that I'm using is called Miro. When I sign up to this account, by the way, this one is a new account. And then guess what happened? Everything seems smooth, right? I used my Google account to sign up, and then they basically had, I think, a series of like 5 to 6 questions about what are you using this for? How did you find out about Miro? How many people are in your team and all that? Those seem to be natural questions that a lot of software, especially B2B type of products, tend to ask. But the thing about this is that this can slow down the user's journey, especially at the start. So you do not want to overwhelm them with too many questions, because when you have too many questions, it creates friction, especially when you're at the start of the user's journey. This is something that you want to prevent the most. You want the user's journey, especially when it comes to the onboarding, especially when your users are showing sign of interest to your product, to be as smooth as possible. Also, another way on how you can actually slow down your user's journey is by having overwhelming pop-up checklist. Okay, this tick box right here is supposed to demonstrate, or I guess illustrate, a checklist. Overwhelming pop-up checklist. Now, I'm pretty sure as a user especially, you probably have seen that products have this sort of like bunch of checklists or bunch of like pop-up tabs of their first setup features. But the thing with this is that this can get quite messy and can get quite overwhelming. Now, of course, I do understand the aspect of trying to guide your users, but there's of course a way more effective way to it. I really want to emphasize on the word overly doing it. Overwhelmingly introducing features or checklists to your users. There's a way more better, efficient, and smoother way for you to do this. And how you want to prevent this is by introducing the checklist or any pop-up feeds when the time is right. So if let's say once your users are really seasoned in your product after the onboarding process or during the onboarding process, this is where you start to slowly introduce some of the checklists. You try to introduce some of the features that they can unlock. You don't not want, okay? The one thing that you don't want to do is when it comes to overwhelmingly introducing the checklist is to do it at the start of the journey. You don't ever want to introduce everything at the start of your user's journey, aka the onboarding process. But then, however, I do understand that going back to friction, right? If you don't have any friction to your product, you'll end up attracting terrible leads that don't convert into paying users or don't convert into users who would upgrade to a higher plan. I understand that. So there's a way on how you can do this, and I call this strategic friction. ST stands for strategic, F stands for friction, you get point. And how you can execute strategic friction is to be limited and intention with your friction. Limited and intentional. What do I mean by this? If let's say you want to ask the questions, right? You want to ask the questions in your onboarding process. First of all, you can do this by not having that many amount of questions. Maybe I would say max, I would say 2 to 3 questions max. Because I also do understand the aspect of you wanting to collect data for feature acquisition and feature marketing purposes. And what this does is that instead of having too many questions and overwhelmingly asking them like an interview, you basically just want to ask them limited questions, high quality questions. So you're being intentional. At the same time, you're also being limited because you're only asking around 2 to 3 questions max. If you really want to see me actually go really in depth in this thing called friction when it comes to why users churn, right down in the description, I actually have this free course, free masterclass that specifically talks about the deep psychological reasons why users leave, such as friction, confusion, and all the things. This is my free info product called Humane, and I really talk in depth about all of these type of things. So it's up to you if you want to do it or not. If you're serious about these type of things, then check it out. It's under the description of this video. So now moving forward, the second thing that cause poor customer experience here is something called feature overload. Feature fucking out, alright. I'm really sorry about this handwriting, but basically F stands for feature overload without context. And this is kind of similar thing to what I talk about on this segment about overwhelmingly introducing your users to checklists and your different type of features. But to just go slightly deeper into it, have you ever opened a product and what you see is a wall of icons, wall of menus? This is what I mean by feature overloading without context, right? Same thing on what I mentioned here. And of course, if you have to have wall of icons, wall of menus, jargons, and messy dashboard, of course, this all connects to slowing down the user's journey, which is friction. And you see, the problem with all of these things that I talked about, right? Too many questions, friction, overwhelming checklists and feature overwhelming without any context. All of these things lead up to what I call the where the fuck am I problem. And you see, the thing with the where the fuck am I problem, users hate getting lost. And when they have to stop and to think about, okay, how do I use this simple feature, or how do I use this, how can I set this thing up? You are slowly creating feature and burning trust and patience with them. Trust and patience is one of the biggest reasons why users were to actually stay. And if you're to think about even any other businesses like, I don't know, airlines, hotels, restaurants, the reason why people keep on coming back is because of something called trust and patience. If you don't have this, you are creating friction, which can also result in confusion, right? Which is this thing called where the fuck am I problem. And so I want you to understand that confusion is a silent churn trigger. And but you see, the good news is that all of these things that I mentioned, all of this messy diagram that I've mentioned, can all be avoided by something called education. And I'm talking about the type of education that doesn't feel like school. I just want you to understand this rule of thumb, which I feel I should have mentioned this earlier into the video. Good product, GP, which is basically good product, is what gets your users into the door. But good education, which is GE, this is what makes your users stay. I just want you to really get this into your head. Good product is what gets your users into the door. And good education is what makes your users stay. That should actually be a slogan or like a quote in this YouTube channel. So now this is the type of education that stops all of this problem that I've mentioned here, right? And you might be wondering, how can I achieve this type of education? Seems like just that in itself, just education can basically solve all this problem. Yes, and this is how you do it. We achieve this by doing micro learning content. Here is what micro learning content means. Nobody wants a 20-page doc that tries to solve a problem, right? No one's gonna read that shit. But however, people do need, and users would actually find this very beneficial. So this is what micro learning content is, MLC. It is one video that provides one solution to one problem. And in case if you're wondering how does it look like, you are literally basically just showing your UI screen recording. You don't want no stock footage and no brain rot animations. Just pure UI screen recording that shows a real life demonstration of your UI, of course. From here, of course, in your UI, you can also show highlights. Annotations are fine, and zoom ins and zoom outs on important elements in your UI. Now, I know this sounds simple, but this is huge. I'm not sharing you some very in-depth stuff or like something that's completely off the world, but at the same time, I am the only one in the software industry that is actually giving you this type of information. All of these things are simple enough for you to execute, so you have no excuses. And so the bottom line is that I want you to stop thinking that your product is the only thing that matters. I want you to prioritize on customer education, which then results into customer experience, which is this right here, CE, customer experience. And what you want to actually prevent is having poor customer experience, of course. Your product here is just the facade. What makes your users stay is good customer experience, which then converts into good customer education. If you really want to go in depth on why your users leave and how to actually make them stay whilst also having the right mental models and what to actually focus on, under the description is here, I say it's my free info product that goes exclusively in depth about all of these things that I've talked about. Because believe it or not, everything that I've shared about here on this very, very beautiful handwriting, they're all the tip of the iceberg. So if you're really serious about the health of your business, of your software product, and you actually really care about customer experience and customer service, and you don't want to have any feature problems with any of this, with something called churn, then check out Humane right now under the description of this video.